There is a saying among technicians that the biggest problems are not always caused by the biggest components. Sometimes a fault that costs just a few £100 can leave an entire television system without signal. If you have ever experienced a situation where your satellite TV keeps losing signal intermittently, this story may be exactly the solution you have been looking for. A client contacted me to complain that their satellite TV was behaving strangely. The channels would come on normally, play for a while, and then suddenly disappear. The decoder would report that there was no signal. After some time, the signal might return on its own, only to disappear again later. It was one of those faults that can easily frustrate both the customer and the installer, because it refuses to behave consistently. As with every troubleshooting exercise, I started with the most obvious checks. I connected my satellite signal meter to confirm whether the dish was still properly aligned. To my surprise, the meter showed that the signal strength and quality were excellent. The dish had not moved, and there was absolutely nothing wrong with its alignment. Since the signal from the dish was good, I considered the possibility that the decoder software might be responsible for the problem. I upgraded the decoder software, tested the system, and everything worked perfectly again. The client was happy, and I left believing the problem had been solved. Unfortunately, that was not the end of the story. A few days later, the client called again to report that the signal had disappeared once more. This time, I suspected that the LNB might be developing an internal fault. After all, the LNB is constantly exposed to harsh weather conditions, including intense sunlight, heavy rain, humidity, and changing temperatures. We decided to replace it with a new one. Once again, the system came back to life. Everything appeared normal. Then, after about 1 week, the client called yet again. The signal has gone. At this point, I realized I needed to stop replacing components and begin looking for the actual cause of the problem. Please, before you continue, hit that subscribe button and like this video. Okay, let us proceed. I carefully inspected the entire installation. Some sections of the coaxial cable had been exposed to direct sunlight for years, so I replaced those sections. I even shortened the cable run to minimize any possible signal loss caused by excessive cable length. Still, the problem remained. Then something happened that completely changed the direction of my investigation. While testing the installation, I accidentally touched the F connector attached to the LNB. Immediately, the signal returned. I removed my hand. The signal disappeared. I touched the connector again. The signal came back instantly. At that moment, I knew I had finally found the real culprit. I removed the F connector for a closer inspection. Although it did not look badly damaged from the outside, the inside had clearly suffered from years of exposure to rain, moisture, and sunlight. The metal had oxidized, and that oxidation had increased the electrical resistance at the connection. Many people think the only purpose of an F connector is to hold the cable firmly onto the LNB. That is not true. The F connector is also an important part of the electrical circuit. The center conductor of the coaxial cable carries both the satellite signal and the DC voltage supplied by the decoder, while the braided shield makes electrical contact with the body of the F connector and provides the return path for the current flowing to and from the LNB. When corrosion or oxidation develops inside the connector, the contact between the cable shield and the connector body becomes poor. Instead of a clean, low-resistance electrical path, the current now has to pass through a high-resistance connection. This is where the science becomes interesting. Aluminium and many other metals naturally oxidize when exposed to oxygen and moisture. Unlike the metal itself, the oxide layer is a poor electrical conductor. In other words, oxidation increases resistance. According to Ohm's law, the voltage drop across a conductor is equal to the current multiplied by the resistance. Even though an LNB draws only a small amount of current, a significant increase in resistance at the connector can reduce the voltage reaching the LNB. An LNB normally operates using approximately 13 volts for one polarization and 18 volts for the other. If the voltage reaching the LNB becomes unstable because of a poor connector, the LNB may fail to operate correctly. It may switch on and off intermittently, fail to change polarization properly, or stop communicating with the decoder altogether. To the installer, it appears as though the dish has lost alignment, when in reality the problem is simply a poor electrical connection. The solution turned out to be remarkably simple. I cut off the old F connector, prepared the cable properly, installed a brand new connector, ensured that the braided shield made solid electrical contact with the connector body, and tightened it securely onto the LNB. Immediately, the signal became stable. No more disappearing channels. No more intermittent faults. No more unnecessary replacement of expensive components. The client has continued using the system without experiencing the problem again. The lesson from this experience is one that every satellite TV installer should remember. Before replacing the decoder, before replacing the LNB, before climbing onto the roof to adjust the dish, and before assuming the coaxial cable has failed, take a few minutes to inspect the F connectors. If they have been exposed to years of rain, humidity, salty air, or direct sunlight, they may have oxidized internally, even if they still look perfectly normal from the outside. Sometimes, the smallest and cheapest component in an installation can create the biggest and most confusing fault. Replacing an F connector that costs only a few hundred naira may save you hours of troubleshooting and thousands of naira in unnecessary repairs. So, the next time your satellite TV starts losing signal intermittently, remember this story. This could be your solution.